Good morning, those who are joining us for today's webinar. Welcome. Thank you for joining us for Stretching Your Staffing Budget in 2025. We're just going to give it a minute or so to allow other people to join the webinar. But hope you're all having a good day so far. Hope you're all get settling back into the swing of things after the half-term break. And again, thank you for joining us today. We look forward to delivering this webinar and hopefully giving you some insight on how you will be able to stretch your budget in 2025 and 2026. So yeah, we'll just give it a moment to allow a few more people to join. Okay, so what I think we'll do, we know time is absolutely key, especially as we've all just returned from the half term. So we will get started and allow people to sort of come in. So again, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us, this afternoon now for Stretching Your Staffing Budget in 2025 webinar hosted by myself. My name is Marianne. I am the Head of Resourcing and Marketing here at Envision Education, and I am joined by Balraj, who is our founder and director. Hello Balraj. Yes, we are running our webinar today focused on stretching your staffing budget. We know we're always aware that schools are under increasing pressure to do more with less. It's a common theme, and balancing limited budgets with the need for consistent and high quality staff is not easy. So today we will be exploring how schools can make smarter decisions when it comes to agency use by planning ahead and getting the best value from their recruitment spend. So I'll be asking Balraj a series of questions. Feel free to pop any questions into the group, into the chat as we go, but we will have some time for a Q&A at the end. So we're going to just start with setting the scene, the reality for schools at the moment. So Balraj, my first question is, what are the biggest challenges schools are facing this year with their staffing budgets?
Great. Thank you, Marianne, and thank you everyone for joining. It's a pleasure to have you here on our webinar. To answer your question in terms of the biggest challenges schools are facing this year with staffing budgets, I think from what we have gathered over the last few months, particularly in 2025, is there's a lot more scrutiny from business managers, from senior leaders, and those really come from obviously reduced spend, given obviously the things that are happening in the market at the moment. So there's tighter budgets. Schools are having to find new ways of managing those budgets. So I think the main challenges are less money and more challenges. They're trying to get the right type of people within their schools in terms of staffing, but they don't always have the budgets that they're used to. So that's obviously a major challenge for schools in terms of facing that. Also, there's the need to fill roles quickly, and despite obviously the spending limits that they have. So they're also in competition with other schools. And from some of the meetings that I've had with some schools recently, a lot of these schools are facing competition in terms of when a really good candidate does come in the market, they are snapped up very quickly, particularly if they are registered with multiple agencies. They tend to get snapped up quite quickly. So that's another insight that I have gained from a few of the schools that I have visited recently. So it's really just higher scrutiny from senior leaders, from a financial point of view as well. Obviously, a major challenge this year has been inflation and the rising costs of living, but also particularly we found that after April 2025, what happened is there was an increase in employers' NI. It rose from 13.8% to 15%. So it's only 1.2% increase. However, that is massive if you're looking at let's just say if there's 100 staff members in a school, that is massive implication. So schools have had to navigate around that, and as we have as an agency as well, we've had to navigate around that as well. So that's been a challenge. But what we have also found is schools have actually found that using an agency has its benefits in terms of that, because especially when you're working with SEN, SEN pupils, for example, there's not always a promise of a permanent job. So that's where actually schools have found it quite beneficial to use agencies for a shorter term period. And obviously they get, if the candidate is working there for a long term period, then, there's, reduced temp to perm, things like that. So I think those would be the kind of main things. But I think the main thing is obviously the cost of the rising costs of living, inflation, and then pay uplifts, and obviously candidates also, you want to balance that with keeping candidates happy in the schools that they're working in as well, and giving them a pathway to progression and things like that. So that's also been a challenge.
Yeah. Absolutely. Okay. All right. Brilliant. Okay. So thank you, Balraj. I think it was really interesting there, particularly with the NI conversation, because I'd thought about it and then I didn't really, when you think, big organizations, schools, exactly, with lots of employees, and it might seem like a small amount, but actually that is a really big increase. So yeah, that was really insightful there. It was something I hadn't thought about directly with that. So great. Okay. So my next one, how has agency spending changed across London and the home counties? Obviously, we've just talked there a bit about how it might have, how it might have changed, but then for us in London and the home counties, how has that changed?
So I would say agencies are definitely becoming schools are becoming much more smarter in terms of agency spend and how they're spending their money with agencies. And I think that's amazing. I think that's fantastic, because when we have conversations with schools, we always try to give value in terms of getting them to understand the implications around agency spend, and the long-term implications, and how they're making the most of their budgets. So I think one of the things we have found is that schools are using agencies a lot more strategically for long-term cover, where we previously found schools are coming to us for lots of day-to-day needs. Schools are now trying to cover those gaps internally, which is the smart way of doing things. But then also, if they need candidates for short-term cover, they could probably also observe those candidates and see how they get on for a potential longer-term role. I think just generally they're being more strategic with how they spend the money with the agencies. And then also there's, as I mentioned to before, there's increased competition. So when they find a good candidate from an agency, then they want to meet that candidate, but they also want to have a good, reasonable charge rate as well, whether it's going to be on a day-to-day basis or employing them on a permanent contract, and then just paying a fee. They obviously want to have a reasonable fee there. So I think in terms of the spending, schools are becoming smarter, and also agencies generally want to give better value as well, because they understand that if they provide that value and with the quality candidates with reasonable costs, then ultimately that school will come back and use that agency again. So I think it's certainly been more strategic. And then it's also diverting budgets as well to where it actually really counts. So I think that's a smart way of doing things. I'm sure businesses across the board would be doing the same thing as well, where they would be thinking strategically about where that money's going. And that's where the smart kind of decisions from senior leadership and the collaboration between senior leadership within schools and their finance business managers, is absolutely crucial. to understand where that money is going, and having a lot of transparency around that. Perhaps, having regular meetings to discuss and things like that. So yeah, I would say that would be, yeah, the main
Okay.
thing.
Great. Okay. Well, this leads actually then, I think, quite nicely into just my sort of final question around setting the scene to sort of wrap this bit up is, do you think that schools are becoming more strategic then with their agencies, or many still firefighting, maybe a mix of both?
Um, to be honest, it's varied across the board. What we find is some schools have become really smart, very organized. Some schools have the senior leadership is maybe not where it needs to be in terms of being able to manage the whole process properly. For example, when you have a change in senior leadership within a school, that changes everything, really, isn't it? It's not just an impact on the pupils, but it's other things as well. So I think it's really varied across the board. Some have become more strategic. The ones that are more strategic, I have found, from my experience, they have a very, very strong senior leadership in place within the school. But then you've got also schools that have a huge amount of SEN needs, and it's naturally going to be a struggle to find good candidates, retain staff within those schools, because of the challenging needs that the children with SEN have. So I would say it does really vary. And then what I would also say is that schools that plan ahead, I think they tend to reduce that churn and also save money in the long run as well. So I think planning ahead, is important. And then also just really looking for partnerships, because also it's the agency you work with as well. If an agency is sending candidates in who are not a good fit for the children, there is really a knock-on effect to that, because it's not just that they've spent that money, but then the turnover isn't going to be great, and that could impact the pupils potentially as well. So I would also say, from my experience from the team that we have here, our consultants, when they really take time to get to know the schools, and also when it's flipped as well, when the school are patient and understanding with the agency and allow them to really get to know the classes and the year groups and things like that, and really have a deeper understanding, that's where the staffing really does get a lot more regulated, and you have less turnover because of that agency school partnership that is really strengthened over time.
Yeah. Absolutely. That makes sense. And I think you've hit the nail on the head there perfectly for moving into the next section, because it is that partnership, it is that relationship. And any partnership or relationship, it's all about getting to know each other. You don't just say I have a relationship with agency or a school and you've never met. It doesn't really make sense. We don't do that in our personal lives. So that's why we are going to be talking about getting the value from your agency relationship. So my first question on this, I'm just going to click here. Hang on, it's not coming up here. There we go. What makes a strong partnership then between a school and an agency? We've touched on some of this now, already, in terms of what schools are doing right. But what would you say are the key things that make a strong partnership between a school and an agency, Balraj?
So, Marianne, there's a number of things there. Clear communication between the agency and the school, an understanding of just small things, like, for example, we as an agency would like to know when is a good time for us to have your kind of undivided attention, to have a conversation, a detailed conversation about any aspect of the relationship, whether it be the budget, whether it be the quality of the candidates, whether it be feedback. And it's kind of locking in the best time that we know we can speak to, whether it be a business manager, deputy head teacher. So understanding that, because again, for example, we've got a consultant here, and she knows that one of her clients, the only time they're available to speak is between 4 and 4:30. So she'll always know that every day if she needs to get hold of the client, that it will be around that time. So I think clear communication, understanding of the school culture as well. Because the more an agency understands the culture of the school, the more likely it will be that we can source and place really strong candidates for those particular classes. Another example would be one of our consultants. She works very closely with an SEN school. It's quite a large SEN school, and she pretty much knows the name of every class. And she actually knows a little bit more than the person she deals with. She actually liaises with on a daily basis. And she'll say, no, I think this candidate will be a great fit in this particular class. And they've got to such a point in their relationship where they will say to my colleague, okay, we trust your judgment. If you think this candidate will be a right fit for this school, for this particular class, please send them in. We'll do a trial day and see how that goes. So that partnership has taken time. It's not just been an overnight success, but what has occurred as a result of that, I mean, I would definitely say this school had a high amount of turnover. And then this consultant, she was absolutely integral to the partnership, and she really took her time to get to know the school. She visited the school. She spent time in the class. And that understanding of the culture and the needs of the pupils was, really, it was very valuable. And as a result, that's decreased the turnover in the school, because she's able to send the right candidates, and pretty much the first candidate she sends is the right fit. She's got that relationship too. So it's been great. I would say also so it's reliability and the speed of which the agencies are working with the schools. So that speed of which, like, ultimately, if a school is approaching an agency to support them with their recruitment, that means that, they will likely need them to support them fairly quickly, which is why they've come to the agency. So I think it's that reliability and speed, but it's got to be balanced with the transparency as well. So, for example, we really like to tell schools, if we don't have a suitable candidate for this particular role, we like to just tell them and be transparent and say, we don't have the right candidate here, but what we will do is we'll go out and source this candidate, and we will keep you updated as soon as we find someone. Because what we don't want to be doing is leaving them hanging, and then ultimately, they could have filled the role rather than waiting for us. So I think it's that speed, but also balance with the transparency. And then it's really about agencies who listen to what the requirements are and take a good brief of the job, and adapt to each of the school's staffing patterns as well. So, for example, what we like to do is we like to spend a bit of time to get details of the job brief. So we've actually got a little questionnaire that we all use, that we ask all of our clients. And they're questions such as, tell me, like, let's just say, for example, it is working on a one-to-one basis with the child. We'll ask them, tell me the needs of the child. What are three qualities that you are looking for in this candidate? How long do you need the candidate for? So all of those things. And sometimes when you're doing things through email, you don't always get that kind of information. School leaders nowadays, they're very pressed for time, so to be able to have that undivided attention, like it is important for the agency, and ultimately it will pay off for the school as well.
Yeah.
So I think those would be the main things.
Excellent. Yeah. Okay. Great. Thank you. Okay. So then on to my next one then. Where may schools lose money through poor agency use or multiple suppliers?
I would say I think mismatched placements. So, again, if a school gets time to understand, if an agency gets takes the time to understand the needs and the job brief,
Mm.
they will likely send in the right candidate. Um, what you don't want is just bodies going in and they're not suitable, they don't have the right skill set, because that's ultimately how the school would lose, they would lose money through that way. Poor attendance as well. So, for example, if you've got a candidate who is, unreliable, that again, will, lead to, losing money potentially. Um, and then also kind of, more sort of lack of, maybe perhaps using multiple different agencies. If you're
Yeah.
using multiple agencies, that potentially is another way, that could be a reason where that budget is, spread thin, and then it goes out to a variety of different agencies, and that could lead to more, admin costs,
Yeah.
all sorts of things. So I think those would be
Yeah.
the main things.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's exactly even admin costs because time is money. So when you're dealing with multiple agencies, because and again, potentially poor use of those, it takes up time, that takes up money.
Yeah.
And then it's all about, again, going back to if you have a strong partnership where expectations are managed on each side, it can really make that difference. Excellent. Okay. So then my next one on getting the value from your agency is how do we look to improve transparency between an agency and school, leading to a valuable relationship? Because it isn't easy, this one.
Yeah.
But what can we do to improve that transparency?
Yeah. So I would say certainly it is open discussions.
Mhm.
So taking the time to, if you're working with an agency, taking the time to have an open discussion, like agencies tend to come forward and ask the school for a visit, and
Yeah,
meet. We always find that meetings, face to face, take the relationship to a completely different level.
yeah,
And it really brings positive, things on both sides. So, but I would say, what's to stop the school asking the agency for a meeting? So saying, actually, I'd love to meet you. I want to know how we can really strengthen our relationship, for these particular. I mean, every school have different needs and reasons, but you want to strengthen that relationship ultimately to meet your end goals. So I think, certainly open discussions, but those open discussions, would be best achieved from those face-to-face meetings.
yeah,
Reviewing data together. So, for example, not being afraid to perhaps asking the agency, can you send me a report of, our agency spend, things like that. And then sort of joint planning around the busy periods or anticipated absences as well. So again, if you're working with a good consultant and a good agency, allowing them to have a bit more freedom in, planning around those busy periods and anticipated absences as well. And
mhm.
as I mentioned to you, school visits are key, to really help with the transparency, across the board.
Absolutely. No, that's great. Yeah, definitely. I think, like I say, that transparency, you become more transparent. The visit enables that. Again, it's just with building any good relationship in anything that we do. And that comes right down, to working again when we go and visit a school, that we can also manage expectations and have our expectations managed as well. So I think that's really, really important. Thank you, Balraj. Right, next section here, smarter staffing strategies. So, what practical steps can schools be taking to make agency spending go further?
So, I mean, I would certainly say the first thing is review the agencies you're using. Understand where the strengths lie in those agencies. What are those agencies supporting you with? What type of recruitment? Do you have an agency supporting you, a different agency supporting you with teachers, a different agency supporting you with TAs? That's absolutely fine. But what I would do is I would look at and review all the agencies you're using, um, where most of the spend has come from, and understanding, can you become more efficient with the agencies you're working with, perhaps by shortlisting to, so say you're using 5 agencies, could you perhaps think about bringing that down to 3 agencies for your important, your cover and absences and longer term cover. I think that allows you to build those solid relationships, and ultimately that will certainly help your spending go further. And then also, where is your main spending going? Is it with teachers? Is it with TAs? How can you make the most of that? You could also look at your temp to perm periods and discussing that with your agency as well.
Yeah.
Uh, so that's the kind of things that I would say in terms of the more practical steps. Um, I would also say, trying to plan ahead as well for known absences, rather than like reacting. That would be help you, make sure you're getting the right type of candidates in. I would also build a small trusted pool of regular staff from agencies as well, because we have some schools where they have absences, they'll just call us and say, "Oh, can we have John back in," for example, because he's been a regular candidate
Yeah.
working at the school. So they've got that trusted pool of staff
Mm.
that they use from one agency. And as I mentioned before, like, don't not shying away from speaking to your school, your agencies about the charge rates and how things work, and what you can do further there as well to prioritize your spending and making sure that you're making the most of it as well.
Yeah.
And then also maybe prioritizing like the longer term bookings to reduce training and onboarding costs, because every time, again, this is the same as when you're getting a candidate in on a daily basis. Each time you have a different candidate go in, it might be a different charge rate, for example. So if you have a regular pool of staff, then that will negate that situation.
Okay, excellent. I think actually what you were saying there that I made a note of is that reducing that 5 agencies sort of down to 2 or 3. And in the spirit of transparency, it works, from the agency side, well as well, because if we know we've got a school that we have that relationship with, whether it's that we're a sole supplier or we're part of 2 or 3, we're able to prioritize our work, our candidates, where they're going. And that has a direct impact on the school, because it means we're giving that focus, we're giving that time and attention, because essentially the competition is slightly reduced, which provides that better service from our side. So I think it's really important that schools are aware of that, and that you've touched on that. That's so important from our side, because it means we prioritize, we give that our absolute focus and attention when we get that booking in, that requirement in the long-term roll in. So that was really great. Thank you. Okay, on to my next question. How can advanced planning and early engagement then reduce costs? We have touched on some of this, and again, even
So
talking about
I
reducing the
would,
agency numbers.
yeah,
But yeah,
I would say, kind of trying to certainly trying to forward book any planned absences. So looking at the
mm,
calendar, have you got staff out on any particular days? Making sure you book candidates in advance, because ultimately, if you book last minute, that might bring up the charge rates as well. So I would say that's one thing. And also, if you're using the same staff, that is going to create consistency. But I think I've covered this in the last question
yeah,
mostly, but I would
yeah,
say definitely the early notice allows the agencies to source better candidates as well, the stronger candidates,
yeah.
to support your school.
Excellent. Okay, great. Thank you. I've got one final this, and this I think is almost kind of a little bit of a summary on this really. The particular types of bookings that provide the better long-term value. So we touched on, sort of the short term, the long term. Yeah. What are the types of
Yeah.
bookings?
So I would say, the longer term ones that would be better as well. So, for example, fixed
Mm,
term, the ongoing support staff. So, for example, consistent TAs for special needs, or any sort of class support roles, and also looking at people who will come in and potentially you can invest in those people to
mm.
grow with the school and potentially become permanent members of the school in the future. Potentially, if they want to go into teaching, even better. If they
Yeah.
have that background, for example, psychology, things like that, they always want to progress into, child psychology, teaching, things like that. So I think that would give better value, because ultimately what you want to build is a pool of staff that are going to be reliable, and a pool of staff who essentially you could look at taking on a long-term or permanent basis in the future.
Great. Yeah. Perfect. Thank you very much, Balraj. Okay. So on to avoiding hidden costs, a big one everyone always wants to know. And I'm just conscious of our time. I think we've got about sort of 7 minutes or so. Again, we know time is tight. So what hidden costs might schools overlook when budgeting for staff?
I would say, as I've touched on, would be the repeated onboarding and training for new temps.
Hmm.
So I think where possible, try to stabilize that by having a candidate come in, and if they're suitable for the role, you're going to potentially offer them a longer term role. But I would definitely look at having a pool of staff that could come in and cover any absences without the need of constantly looking at the onboarding and training
Yeah.
costs that might be involved. So that I would say is the main thing there.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you. And then my just second question on here, how can we as agencies help schools spot and manage these costs early?
I think I spoke about this earlier, but definitely
Mm,
the regular reviews of
yeah.
usage. So
Yeah.
not being afraid to ask the agency, can I have a report of our
Mm,
agency spend, because we
yeah.
can provide those kind of things. Well, most agencies should be able to provide that. So I would definitely say that meeting up with the agency regularly to understand the spending patterns,
Yeah.
sort of sickness reporting as well.
Yeah.
How often are the supply staff calling in sick? How
Yeah.
can we improve upon that as well? Understanding, are there any kind of underlying reasons around those absences
Yeah.
that potentially might cause some costs further down the line. So I would
Okay.
definitely say that. And then also just ensuring the compliance is watertight as well, with any agencies that you're using.
Absolutely.
Yeah, those are the main ones.
Great. Thank you very much. Okay. So looking ahead, making budgets work harder in 2025, 2026 when they're already working incredibly hard. But what trends do we expect to see in school staffing over the next year?
Yeah, I would say proactive planning. I would say that schools are definitely planning ahead. They're looking at their recruitment cycles, September, January, Easter, resignation dates. They're looking a lot more in advance, and I think that's the right thing to do. And then also schools valuing the quality, and the reliability over rates. So I would definitely say, like, the cheaper rates are good, but it doesn't always lead to the better
Yeah.
outcomes.
Yeah.
And when you've got an agency, for example, really offering very low rates, sometimes you do have to question how they're doing that.
Yeah.
So I would definitely say the trends,
Okay.
the kind of trends. I think schools are just generally getting smarter, and that's a great thing to see. And also more strategic collaboration with agencies as well, and finding maybe a handful of agencies they use, and really building those, taking time to build those relationships.
Absolutely. Great. Okay. On to my next. Well, I think we'll try and do two at the same time here because we haven't got too long left now. So my next question, if I just click through here, it's not clicking along. Oh, there we go. So how can schools future-proof their staffing budgets? And then if I click along to my final one as well, Barrage, because I think we might be able to kind of get those in together and linking to a piece of advice.
I'll just talk about the piece of advice that we would
Yeah,
give. That
yeah,
would be, if I could say three things: prioritize relationships.
yeah.
So a trusted agency ultimately will help you save time, money, and stress. I would also say communicate with those agencies as early as you can, plan ahead, and measure what works. So get to know the agencies, sit down with them, understand how that works. And then also, finding that trusted recruitment partner that can take your recruitment to the best, to the best position you want your school to be in. That's what I would say.
Absolutely. Brilliant. Okay. Well, thank you very much for all of that, Barraj. And I hope that, again, we've covered quite a few things here. We could actually spend all day, which we do, essentially talking about these things. And whilst we did want to have some time for a Q&A, we're not going to run over. Again, we know time is absolutely key, but we do ask if anyone does have any questions, if you want to quickly pop them in the chat, we will come back to you directly. Or you can pop us an email here. So first of all, what you can see on the screen there, your eyes will be drawn to the QR code. It will be great if we can get your feedback. If you scan that code, you'll be taken to a feedback form, but we will also follow up an email with you as well. But again, we want to say thank you to joining us today. I'd like to say thank you to Balraj for answering all of my questions. And if you would like any tailored advice on planning your staffing and budget, or reviewing any of your agency spend, as we say here, please get in touch with Balraj directly. And Balraj, is there anything you'd like to finish on today?
I think I should just add, this is we launched our webinar series in earlier in 2025, and we've only done webinars focused on our candidates. So this is the first webinar we've done focused specifically with school leaders. So we're quite proud of that. And I'm really sorry we didn't get a chance to do the Q&A, but it's a lesson learned for next time. And I really appreciate you joining us on this webinar. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, everyone. Again, thank you, Balraj, as well. We hope you have a lovely afternoon. And yes, have a great week. Take care.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Bye.